Hey guys, it's Holly. So today I wanted to do a pretty interesting comparison video, and that is comparing the 2022 Hogwarts Express Collectors Edition direct-to-consumer set with the 2018 Hogwarts Express playset. Now, I say this is going to be an interesting comparison because of the fact that these sets are fundamentally so different. So I'm going to sort of do this in a bit of a different fashion, considering you can't just say, hey, the bigger Hogwarts Express is better because, you know, it's bigger, it's got more minifigures, because these are on completely different price ranges. But I thought it would be a really interesting comparison either way because of the fact that this playset one is going to be on shelves until the end of the year. So if you are planning on buying this playset one, I recommend probably doing it pretty quickly, because I think the second that this collector's edition one goes on sale, I think more people are going to be gravitating towards the playset one, purely firstly because of its cheaper price point, but secondly, to me at least, I feel like it's actually a better set overall. Now, before I really get into why, I want to explain how this comparison is actually going to work. So firstly, I'm going to just compare all the different aspects of each build, because for the most part, these sets contain the same things, besides the collector's edition, which comes along with a brick built track. As the playset one didn't come with a track at all, not even like the standard Lego City train tracks. However, it is compatible with them. I do own some of them, and personally, that's how I did display it. I just connected some of the straight ones and sort of had it running through the platform, so that is an option, but it is an extra. Besides that though, they've all got an engine, a tender, a passenger cart, and a platform. There's also another area where these sets overlap, and that is the minifigure department, as the 2018 playset set was based upon the Prisoner of Azkaban, which funnily enough is also included in the collector's edition. However, of course, since it is a larger set, it does come with a lot more minifigures, as it depicted 4 films instead of just the 1. So for the sake of this comparison, I'm going to disregard all of the additional minifigures, and I'm also going to disregard the train track. Now, I have a full review of the collector's edition Hogwarts Express up on the channel, and overall my thoughts mainly with this set were that overall the build was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. It's a beautiful model, it's very clean, it looks incredible, but as a set it doesn't feel like it was complete. It also to me doesn't feel overall too cohesive. Like, everything just seems a little bit out of proportion, and as great as each individual segment of that set is, as a whole it felt like it was missing something. It's also incredibly difficult to display because it is so big, and that's one thing when I look at these two sets that I realized is that bigger doesn't always mean better when it comes to Lego models. While the collector's edition has a lot more detail and a lot more room to show that detail because of its larger scale, it does feel like they almost wanted to put too many things into that set and left us with a platform that overall just didn't feel like it was that great. So to kick off this comparison, let's have a look at the engines. So starting off with the train, of course we have this front engine section, and overall I think these two builds are absolutely fantastic for what they are trying to accomplish. Firstly, with the collector's edition one, this thing is a work of art. It's really well built. There are an amazing build techniques. They managed to squeeze in every little bit of detail. It just overall looks absolutely incredible, and the same goes for the playset version. At the smaller scale it needed to be at. There's very few things that I feel like could have been better and maybe I guess are wrong with this model, but for the most part the whole thing feels very, very concise, very, very clean, and really, really good depictions of these trains. Now, when it comes down to physical size, there is a very big difference between the two, but for the most part, I feel like this scale remains pretty consistent. The only thing I would say about the playset one is that lengthwise, it feels like it's a little bit more condensed, and I sort of get that vibe overall with the playset version. Like, the whole train just feels a little bit more condensed in order for them to have managed to put that platform in. Besides that, there really aren't too many things. There is, though, a noticeable lacking of those sort of like golden accents that were included in the playset version, which mostly I put down to scale. I mean, it would have been really cool if they could get just some of that in there, specifically I guess when it comes to the window, or even a little bit more when it comes to this back signage, but for the most part it's just completely absent, and I feel like there were some slight areas for it to have happened or been included, but unfortunately it didn't quite make it. Now, surprisingly, there is one part about these two trains that remains consistent, and that is these printed Hogwarts Castle arch tiles that fit inside both of the trains. Now, admittedly, I think this actually looks far better on the playset one than the sort of collector's edition one. To me, it doesn't really feel like it quite matches as much. I've knocked it off several times. It sort of sticks out a little bit. I feel like it just sort of hugs the shape of the curve a little bit better on the playset version, so that is something that I actually really enjoy. Another noticeable difference between the two is that this sort of black line or like tube that heads across the train is completely black on the collector's edition. However, on the playset version, it's only black at the very beginning, and then it's done using these two poles, which are more red and actually blend in, I think, with the color of the train a little bit better. One area I felt the collector's edition did not do very well though is the front of the train, and this is where I feel like the playset one reigns superior. Firstly, we have an entirely printed dish piece, which is fantastic, no weird stickers, and also to me, like, even though it's technically not accurate and the Hogwarts Express sign does actually stick in front of the train a little bit, having it closer and pretty much printed on that brick looks so much better than having this sign that sticks out way too far, unfortunately. It's also a lot smaller of a signage because of the curve piece that it was needed to put on. You really couldn't get that same height, and overall it just looks a little too small, I think, when putting these two side by side especially, and that sign overall has just really not been something that I've been a massive fan on. And at the end of the day, that really just comes down to Lego's proportions. In order to make this sign, it had to stick way further out than it probably should have, which is really disappointing, and for that reason I really feel like that playset one did so much better. As I turn the trains around, you can see what I mean by it just sticks out a little too far because of all of those bricks, like it's really hanging off, which is just something you do not get with that playset one. When you turn the train around as well, there are again some pretty noticeable differences when it comes to what is included at the back of the engine. Now, firstly, again, these little rods are depicted as black on the collector's edition and red on the playset version. But the biggest difference between the two, I think, is just, I guess, the overall design. Like on the playset, there are these gaps here because panel pieces were used, which I'm not a huge fan of. And also the entire interior where they're burning the coal is completely light bluish gray. You've got a couple of dials, which personally I really like, but on the collector's edition, the entire thing is black. Now, both of these luckily do have space where you could put a Hogwarts Express conductor, which in the collector's edition is included in the set, which is really neat. And overall, I think the collector's one looks a lot more clean, but personally, I love the fact that you sort of have those little dial details and it looks a little bit more visually interesting than just solid black on the collector's version. And while these two builds are very drastically different, overall, I don't think I prefer one to the other. I mean, the collector's edition definitely, I think, is more accurate, and mainly that just comes down to size and scale. But when you take that out of it, both of these do exactly what they needed to and do it really, really well. There's only a couple of minor issues. A lot of the playset ones just come down to coloring and just color choices. And with the collector's edition one, it comes down a lot to just the proportions of Lego overall, which is not really a bad thing overall. I think these two are both fantastic. Next up, we're going to take a look at the two tenders, and as you can see, there is a very clear sort of scale issue with the playset one here. This thing is a very little stumpy little rectangle. It's very short, it's very squished, it's very tall for what it needed to be, and then the collector's edition one was able to actually, I guess, get that sort of scale right and properly depict it because of its larger size, which overall just looks so much better. But besides that, it also has a lot of detail, which they probably could have actually put in the playset one, like having the coal at the top and just having a little bit more than this flap, I guess, to store some luggage in there. Like that's basically what this felt like to me, is just a luggage container, which really is not all that accurate. It does make use though of that empty space that I guess is on the inside of the model, which for the collector's edition is literally just left empty space. Like you can't open it, you can't get in there. It is just quite hollow in there, but at least it does have a little bit more extra detailing on the top, which is something that I really appreciated. For both of the signs, unfortunately, there was stickers involved. However, one thing that I do like as well is that the yellow was brick built on this collector's edition one, whereas it was just stuck on in like a dark tan color on the playset one. It really doesn't stand out all that much. And honestly, it looks like this black plate is more of an accent than the actual gold pieces, which is quite disappointing. And again, just like the engine, there are some color swaps here with these little rods on the side. However, this time on the playset, they are black, and on the collector's edition, they are red. Besides that, on one side of the collector's edition one, the side is red, and this tiny playset one is black. And then on the other side, they both match a little bit better. Overall, neither of these two sort of sections really do an awful lot for the set. I mean, the playset one does offer a little bit of storage, which is really good, but on the collector's edition, it's really just, I guess, a portion of the train that they felt like they needed to do. There's no storage, there's no interior or anything like that. There is a little bit of detail, which is nice and quite accurate to trains, but really besides that, there's not really much going on between either of these models. But if one was definitely going to be labeled better than the other, it is the collector's edition one in this case, just because they were able to get the scale right and because they really condensed and sort of shrunk down the Hogwarts Express in this version of the playset one. This tender really does not look that great overall. The fourth and final aspect of these two sets that I want to take a look at is, of course, the passenger cars. Now, besides the size, there is quite a lot of differences just in terms of the overall design and, of course, as well, what they were managed to include in these two models. Now, the first one that is pretty noticeable to me and something that I wish was different on the playset version is the actual color scheme of these sets. Now, the passenger car from the playset version had a dark tan strip that went along the side. It also didn't have any at the top. And the dark tan to me really just didn't scream out Hogwarts Express. It wasn't as bright and vibrant and colorful. And that is one thing that I love so much better about the collector's edition one. You've actually got that golden yellow strip, not only running down the bottom, but at the top. Something else that is completely absent between these two models is as well a little sticker or even print of the Hogwarts crest on the collector's version, which personally, I don't really believe off the top of my head that that is all that accurate. I think just having the passenger car on its own is far better than actually having this tiny sticker. Like personally on the playset version, I would have much preferred they sort of get rid of that sticker, bring that sort of tan line, which ideally would be gold and yellow down, and be able to put a second one on top of all of the windows there. Now this playset one also has a lot more windows than the collector's version does on both sides actually. Like this collector's version one has 3 windows, but then you've also got these sort of small ones on the side alongside 2 doors, whereas the playset you've got 4 of these smaller windows, which are actually all ones that can open up and sort of hinge out if you really wanted to. However, there is no doors included on this, and it's also not entirely enclosed. While they both have a design for these sort of end cap pieces featuring an arch, there isn't actually a door or even just like I guess a window panel piece that is put in there to sort of close off the entire passenger car, which personally I'm not a huge fan of. When you look at the overall wheel design as well between these two trains, there is no sort of center bit on the passenger car of the first one. I imagine that's probably because there isn't any pieces that would realistically fit within that sort of scale, but that is something that I also wanted to show off. And again, because of the scale, the wheels take up the entire sort of width of the train rather than the collector's version where there is a little bit of space on either side of these buildings. Now, both of these models as well do open up in their own ways, with the playset version being sort of the really obvious thing of you can just take the roof off, and then inside you've got 4 sort of spaces for all of the minifigures to fit, which is great because you can fit Lupin, Harry, Hermione, and Ron all in here and sort of have a little bit of space for the trolley witch as well to walk around in that set. There's not a lot of space, but there's just enough, and the fact that you can fit all of the minifigures inside of it is a really big win, I'd say, with this playset version. The only real downside, I think, is that this little black tile on either side doesn't really match the color scheme of each thing, as well as the fact, again, that there is no door sort of closing off everything. Besides that, I really love what they were able to do with such a small scale. Then again, with the collector's edition, are of course a lot more options to open up the train. For the most part, the color scheme as well did stay the same, which is amazing. You've got sliding doors in like each individual cabin because there's just so much more space that you are able to play with on this model. But I love the fact that, I guess for the most part between the two, the color and sort of design is pretty consistent, which is really nice. The way that the collector's edition one opens up is definitely a lot better, being able to take off just entire wall sections, which is really helpful because you can just move things around quite simply. Whereas if you wanted to do that with the playset version, you just have to rip off the entire wall, which again is quite helpful and allows you to really, I guess, open this up and play with it and put minifigures in. But at the same time, you can't really leave this window open all that well without it looking just a little bit odd. Though that being said, I think both of these models really opened up in a way that I think best fits their scale. However, overall, purely I think just coming down to the color scheme and overall, I guess, just aesthetic look of this, the collector's edition for this particular model wins in this regard. I really wish that that tan line was not tan and was golden brown. I feel like that would have brought up this playset one a heck of a lot more.
When it comes to build for these two sets, the first aspects that I really want to focus on are the two platforms, and this, in my opinion, is really where the Playset 2018 one really shines. Now, for the most part, of course, the design and everything is better on the collector's edition. I mean, there's more space, there's more bricks, but in the grand scheme of the set, this platform feels very much like an afterthought. It feels very incomplete. It just doesn't feel like good enough, I guess, for what the rest of the set is. Whereas with the 2018 one, the scale is a lot better because this platform is almost as big as the actual train itself. It feels a lot more in proportion and just feels a lot more cohesive than the collector's edition platform does. Not only that, but unlike the collector's edition, it actually features both sides of sort of the King's Cross train station. You've got regular King's Cross complete with this really nice arch that really, I think, reflects the actual train station that is in London, which I'm a really big fan of. But not only that, the minifigures can run through the wall and quite literally be transported onto platform 9 3/4, which is the smallest section of the build. And that's the thing as well, you don't really need much besides a couple little signposts to really say that, hey, this is platform 9 3/4. And for this scale, and I guess like type of set as well, the Playset one does an amazing job really just trying to complete the platform. It just feels overall a lot better of a fit when it's sort of accompanying the set that it came with than the collector's edition one does. The train can fit through the middle of the archway. Overall, there's a lot more space as well to sort of, I guess, display your minifigures, which is something that collector's edition platform does do really well, admittedly. However, I feel like with this platform, it just feels a lot more alive. Now, the collector's edition one necessarily isn't bad, but it just doesn't feel quite as strong. It's a lot smaller in comparison to the scale of the train, which really is not a good look. Some of the things I do really love about it, though, is just the design of the archways. I think they look really neat. I love the additional signage, especially using this little flag here. And one thing that I absolutely love is just how completely tiled off and smooth the entire platform is. Like, you've got the little jumper plates for the minifigures, but besides that, it feels very clean, which is just something that they couldn't really achieve very easily on a playset one. On the opposing side as well, there are some resemblance of like little archways to represent King's Cross, but really it's not all that much. And the way it actually connects in with the set, like you cannot really see this side at all, which also means if you're going to display it the way that the set sort of recommends, you can't see the quote tile, you can't see the display plaque, and it just doesn't feel like it was quite thought out very well. Speaking of that display plaque, it's a really nice addition, but it does have a spelling mistake, which also really lets this one down. This playset one just really feels overall a lot more cohesive. It really feels like this was really considered a lot when making this set. It's a very large element of the set overall, which definitely is not the same for the collector's edition. But overall, the platform just feels a lot more complete and a lot more cohesive, which is just something that collector's one does not manage to get right. Which is why I definitely think when it comes down to the platform, this playset one wins by a mile.
Now, the last aspect I want to touch on with these sets is, of course, the minifigures. Now, like I said, out of the 2022 one, I've only taken out the minifigures that are the same as the 2018 set, which is pretty much all of the Prisoner of Azkaban ones, plus the Trolley Witch as well, who in this set at least was counted as a Philosopher's Stone minifigure, which absolutely makes sense. Now, while both sets share the exact same minifigures, there are significant upgrades done on the 2022 versions, most notably being that Ron and Harry both have accurate outfits, and all three of the main trio as well have accurately sized legs, which was just not a thing on the 2018 version. Now, keep in mind at this time as well, this was the only Prisoner of Azkaban set that was made. Everything else was Chamber of Secrets or Philosopher's Stone, so maybe they hadn't quite worked out how they wanted to do the legs at that point, which is the only reason that I feel like they don't quite match. Now, out of these minifigure selections as well, the Dementor is exactly the same between both of them. However, every other minifigure is different, which I find really interesting considering I don't necessarily think the Trolley Witch needed to be upgraded. However, the upgrades that they did make, I think, are much better on her with the Collector's Edition one. Like, even when it comes down to her actual trolley, having stickers on it just really makes it look better. Not to mention as well the Birdie Bots beans, everything just looks so much better on her newer trolley.
When it comes to Lupin, there is a pretty significant upgrade, but then again, I don't think it was one that was all too necessary. I really like the 2022 version. I love the torso print. I love the fact that he's got some leg printing and everything matches. It's all one color. His face looks pretty similar as well overall, but I much prefer the alternate wolf face on the newer Lupin as to the original, which was a lot more aggressive. They've both got the same hairpiece as well, but for the most part, the outfit is pretty much the exact same. When it comes to the trio though, Harry and Ron are major steps up against the 2018 version, and even Hermione to some degree. However, I do actually prefer the leg color on the 2018 Hermione. I think that works a lot better than the black one does. But then again, I feel like that's a very small thing, and overall, I just think the 2022 lineup is a major improvement and a major step up compared to the playset version. But then again, the playset version isn't necessarily that bad. It's just definitely not as good. There's a lot more inaccuracies and a lot
ultimately, like I said, these sets are for two very different audiences, so it is a little bit of an unfair comparison, but to me, I think you are much better off just buying the playset version and putting the money that you might spend on the collector's edition into another one of the larger Harry Potter direct-to-consumer sets like Hogwarts or Diagon Alley that I feel like just are a little bit more complete, look better on display, and are a lot easier to put on a shelf as well than the Hogwarts Express. I'm glad that this set exists. I think it's gorgeous, and I'm not surprised that it did get made either. I think it was very much a thing that probably should have happened. But I think for the price point that they went for, it doesn't quite live up to, I feel like, what it should have. But let me know what you think about these two sets, and ideally as well, like what type of scale do you think would be perfect for, I guess, a larger scale Hogwarts Express? Because to me, while I do think this scale is really cool, I just think it's a little bit too big overall. I much would prefer something that was a little bit in between these two that could fit on regular train tracks, that wasn't quite as large, and I feel like as well, that would fix a lot of the issues with the collector's edition. But like I said, let me know in the comments down below, and if you guys enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel down below. And until next time, guys, I'll see you later.